I think we have some audience questions.
Yeah, so now if you gentlemen can stay right there, we're going to open it up. We've had this great attentive audience this entire time who I'm sure have a lot of questions. Sir, come on over here. Why don't you go ahead and give us your name and tell us where you're from.
I'm Warren Sahosky. I'm a logger from Menominee County in the UP.
Well, thank you so much for being here. Warren, go ahead and direct your question to the panel.
I don't know, maybe I should comment rather than asking a question. I'd like to follow up on this water quality stuff, but here's my question. In addition to the bugs and the diseases that we are familiar with, what do you perceive to be the future threats to forest health?
Who wants to take that one first?
Maybe I'll start a little bit with invasive species. Thanks, Warren, for the question. We've got Asian longhorn beetle that's really at our doorstep. It's in suburban Columbus. It was in Chicago. It's on the East Coast. That beetle preys on maple trees. It has a host of 30 different species that it will prey on, but its favorite host is maple. That's the #1 forest type that we have in Michigan. If that pest comes into Michigan, it again will substantially change our forests as we know them today. So we really need to be vigilant in invasive species, watch that, and not let it in our door.
You know, I think to me it really points out the importance of I think across all of our organizations of the importance of planning ahead of time. So again, with the Nature Conservancy, when we think about our forest conservation, we try to do an exhaustive planning to think about what are all the potential stressors to our forest systems. And I think for something like invasive species, it really gets back to collaboration amongst all of our different stakeholders, all those different landowners. It really stresses the importance of kind of early detection and rapid response. We've talked about that with aquatic invasive species, but it's just as important that we share information on the detection of these terrestrial invasive species as well.
All right.
I guess if I could just
go ahead,
do
Bill.
a quick addition. We talk about biological diversity in forests, and for some folks of our viewers and in the audience, you might remember the tree-lined streets with American elm. It was only elm, and that lack of diversity when the Dutch bark beetle came in resulted in actual destruction of beautiful forested avenues. So diversity has its values.
And I think a lot of people can relate with the ash borer as well, when ash trees just
It gives us options to these stressors.
Okay. All right, we have another question. Hi, ma'am. Go ahead and tell us who you are and where you're from.
I'm Carolyn Schultz, excuse me, from Ann Arbor,
All right.
southeastern Michigan, right here. My question is, what about the human intervention, invasive of fracking, and what effects that will have or could have on the water? Who's in charge of that, decisions and so forth?
So again, we have another land use question here, and we oftentimes think about fracking or energy development, or I think this also leads kind of biomasses. How do we account for those in our management of these vast landscapes?
Well, I think that clean water question is a question for all uses, not just forestry, for energy development, for recreation. No matter what the development is in the forest, clean water and assurance of clean water is really important. So we have a Department of Environmental Quality that regulates those type of activities. And they're looking at that. If fracking, if forestry, if trail development, if anything is compromising our water quality, we're going to need to make those changes quickly.
Some of the real issue there is creating that balance between our concern about non-sustainable uses of our lands and the need for a strong economy that can support some of our small communities. Many of the small communities in the Upper Peninsula are simply growing smaller and smaller. The high schools are being shut down. So it's really important, and some of the issues we see at the local level is trying to balance, what do we want to make certain that we do to protect the environment, yet also provide for social and community stability.
So my last thought on that is the fracking issue is not just a water quality issue, it's also a land use issue. And some of our colleagues, Nature Conservancy's colleagues in Pennsylvania, have looked at the impact on that development on the landscape and how we can minimize the fragmentation. So it's not just the water, but we also have to inform the design of the pads, of the roads, and try to limit and minimize the impact that can have on the landscape as well.
All right, thanks so much for your question, Caroline. Does anybody else have a question over here? Go ahead.
Got about one minute.
All right, go ahead and give us your name. Tell us where you're from.
Lloyd Semple from Detroit.
Okay, Lloyd, go ahead.
Patrick, and maybe this is for Jim. I heard a lot of defense against invasive species being directed at diversification of the forest. do we just give up and write the obituary to the ash tree and surrender to the boar? Or are there other developments that are occurring with respect to invasive species and winning the battle against them?
With respect to the ash borer, it's very well established in the lower peninsula. The upper peninsula is still, there's pockets of emerald ash borer, but it's still sort of localized. Given the winter we've had, we're hoping that the ash borer doesn't like -35 temperatures. So, but you know, it's so pervasive on the landscape at this point in time, it's going to be difficult, I think, to really stop that trend. I think we're going to be able to slow it. We've done things with quarantining wood when we can move wood, those kind of things. But yeah, the writing's kind of on the wall for.
But we do have some successes, and I'll give you one quick one. Beech bark diseases is taking beech out of the forest at the same time ash is. But there's some beech trees that are resistant. So we're finding those trees that are resistant and then propagating those trees. So they might be the next generation of beech. So there are some successes. I wouldn't write the obituary yet.
All right, well, we've had a lot of good conversation here, a lot of interesting issues brought up and some good solutions. So, Patrick, I'm going to hand it over to you just for our final minute here to kind of give us what should we be taking away from today?
Yeah, I was at home yesterday, and my son poked his head in the door, and he said, "Yo, Dad, I'm going to be out in the woods." And he slammed the door shut, and I think he was saying that as he was running out the front. And I think I've said that to my parents, and I bet you have all said that to your parents, and I bet your kids and others, that I'm going to the woods. And we all know what that means, right? We all know that means that solace, that exploration, those valuable areas, that nature. And so I think we've talked about a variety of strategies here to make sure that our woods are always there, whether it's the core conservation areas or these broad sustainability initiatives or working forest easements, all these things. And I think it's not just us, but it's that whole collaboration of all those stakeholders, that whole community that can make sure that these forests remain as forests. So thank you all for coming today.
Yeah, all right, thanks so much to Patrick Doran, and thanks to our panel today and to our Great Lakes audience who really engaged in the discussion. It's been a great conversation about the impact of healthy forests on the Great Lakes and also how to engage private landowners to manage forests that sustain business, but also work for the environment. For what's happening in your state, just go to greatlakesnow.org. For all of us at Detroit Public Television and the Nature Conservancy, I'm Christy Mcdonald. Take care. We'll see you next time.